John, good morning. Thank you for joining Thought Africa on our live conversation today. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
We really appreciate you jumping on board. If I am honest in saying, we've been following a lot of your Instagram TVs, your live videos, a lot of your communications over the last 7 months, especially because of that saying, the uncertainty. But even before then, if I'm honest, a lot of the knowledge bombs, the little bits and pieces of advice we have tangibly applied into our own little lives. So just before we start anything, I just want to say thank you for taking the time. It's a really cool opportunity to have this chat with you.
Well, thank you so much. One of my teachers a few years ago said to me that the access to your higher mind or your genius or your creativity is to be shared. And if you stop sharing it, you'll stop getting access to it. It's a flow of information, not a dam of information. And that would really struck me. And so I'm continuously sharing anything I learn along the way so that more people can wake up and be uplifted and all of us can create a better and more productive world ahead of us.
So let's take that as the launch pad for our chat today. In preparation for this conversation, I watched an interview with you on the Espresso show, I think not too long ago, where you were quoted, excuse me if I'm paraphrasing correctly, but the knowledge that you are gaining along your own journey, and as you're, I suppose, gaining more experience in life, you're putting that forward in a form of a book. So the last 4 years, if I have it right, you've released a book almost every single year. Is that deliberate? Is that something that you aim to do for the foreseeable future? Just to share that information with everyone?
Yeah, sure. You know, there's a great saying that says, I don't learn to write, I write to learn. In other words, when you make a commitment to writing a book, it's quite a mammoth task. But what happens is the most amazing thing happens is that every time you listen or engage with any information, it's a potential part of your book. So what starts to happen is you start listening to the world and watching the world in a more sticky way. So everything I listen to now starts becoming part and parcel of a story I could tell to bring about the answers and the impact I want the book to bring. So I always start with one big question, and the big question is often a reflection point of where I'm at in my life. My first book was, how big and how bold are you thinking about the world? The second book was, how elegant and how conscious are you thinking about the world? The third book was, how do you become naturally adaptive and flexible and optimistic in an uncertain world? And my fourth book is about, how do you conquer uncertainty? And so all of these sort of books are reflection points in my ability to work myself out into a maze, stretch myself further, or to create more impact. And if I'm able to share this with more people, then more people can be switched on through my own personal realizations and research. So yes, it's a purposeful process because it upgrades my perspective, it adds more value to the world, and ultimately makes me a better thinker and a better writer.
Right. So I want to almost humanize the John Sanei and your process in the last, say, 4 years, at least that I've been exposed to your work. And the reason I'm doing this is that it will introduce I suppose, a bit more of a topic that we'll come into in a moment. But that introspection, or the ability to know that ongoing learning, I think you've also said becoming global citizens, becoming global students, is something that's so important. Has that always been part of your DNA? Has it always been part of your curiosity to just want to know more and then share?
Look, I think my idea of success changed when I turned 40. And I'm 45. So the last 5 years, I've been writing books every year, right? Before 40, my idea of success was very much about being seen by the world. And I think that many people in the world are stuck in this need for acknowledgement over actually accessing their genius. So as much as I wanted to do this sort of work, I wasn't doing it for the right reasons. And it was only when I became an adult, and I say this with respect because I think as men at 40, something happens to us, something major shifts within our beings and our subconscious. And it really was the beginning of me becoming, or taking on the role of really going into this idea of teaching stuff that I was learning. So yes, I think it's always been there. I just think that my motivating factor was different. And now that I've become a man, my motivating factor has moved from me to we. And in that process, it becomes obvious for me to share my learnings. It becomes obvious to be generous with the knowledge that I'm getting access to. And so now it just makes sense.
Right. Well, it's good to know, at least from my perspective. I've got a few more years until I come to that realization. I've got time on my side. So thanks for the heads up. John, there were 3 questions which you had answered. I think you had posted a little while ago on your Instagram, and I know that you've just started a podcast called the Expansive Podcast. I'm not exactly sure on the timeline when they came to be, but a lot of the questions, at least that I saw there, you were answering 3 particular points around education in the future, or education in what the world might be in amongst its uncertainty. And I would love to just sort of use that as the initial conversation. Our audience is mostly geared towards our private school kids as well as our township students. And as a company, we try not to segregate what education might look to each of these people. It's about connecting passionate thinkers. It'll be about real world applications. And we tend to sometimes flow a lot of buzzwords across the conversation, but trying to humanize it for people that deal with our product or people that come across us. If I can just ask the question bluntly from the start and then feed off from there, education in its existence today, where do you see it going from 2021 onwards, or say a primary, high schooler, secondary, tertiary schooling, if we can use that as the launchpad for this conversation?
So I like to give context before actually answering the question itself. And I think a lot of the answers sit in the context much more than the content. And so the context for me is for us to rewind 150 years or so and really started to see the growth and the traction of the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution was a production line that required efficiency, skills, production to ultimately bring about a place of economies of scale and profitability. That's kind of what the production line was all about. But that production line then became a corporation. It moved from a horizontal production line to a vertical production line. And that corporation had pretty much the same needs: hyper efficiency, skill sets to bring about economies of scale and profitability. But what's happened is that we've arrived at something called the surplus society. And in the surplus society, what has happened is that billions of people have studied similar courses, which are working for similar companies, who are creating similar products for similar consumers. And we've almost become surplus sized in everything we do. Everything's becoming commoditized. And we all know that our parents' generation was all about getting a good education, a degree, a job, and then staying in it. And that was kind of the linear world that we lived in. But now that we're in this new world where your degree doesn't guarantee you anything, working for any corporation doesn't give you any long-term security, the government doesn't have the know-how or even the funds to look after us, it starts becoming clear that the idea of what education used to be doesn't actually fit into this new world because it doesn't give you any guarantees. Now, the biggest problem with education has always been the fact that it trained us to become cogs in a machine. In other words, when you finished school, you were given an option of 5, 10 different roles you could play in society. And these roles were called degrees. And these degrees were lawyers, accountants, doctors. These were the things you could become. There was no other option. There wasn't like you can grow up little Johnny, you can become an entrepreneur. There was nothing like that. And so we realized that many of people that have become highly accomplished could be very unhappy because what they've done is they've logically made a decision to fit into a role and a cog in the machine, becoming very accomplished, but never actually reaching their purpose. And so we've arrived at society today, and the younger generations are like, why would you want to do a job that doesn't make you happy? It just makes you money. And so what happens is you've got all that money and all those trappings, but you're a drug addict, alcoholic, and having an affair. I mean, so what's the point of actually achieving that? So understand that education was this idea of safety, not curiosity, not joy, safety. And this idea, again, was very much brought about by the baby boomers because the baby boomers were motivated by security and safety because of the World War and how they came out of that World War. So the ideation has been very linear. So if we think about where we're going and understand that the world we're moving towards really has lost its ability to forecast very well. There are so many moving parts. I mean, any business has got 3 pillars: forecast, plan, and execute. What's going to happen, how are we going to plan to do it, and how are we going to execute it? Now what's happened is that nobody knows what's coming in the future. Look, I'm part of Singularity University in San Francisco, a body of incredibly smart people that think about technology and DNA and genome and these amazing things. They don't know what it looks like in the future. I'm also an associate partner at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, and they study global societal shifts. And guess what? They also don't know what's really coming. So we sit in a world of uncertainty. So the idea of success and what education was going to bring us based on the world being the same when we finished what we were studying, bringing about a safety net of security is gone. And so we sit as society in a transition phase between this old world and the new world. And this is a very difficult place to be, because the parents that are putting their kids in school, and in fact, even your own degrees as parents, you realize that they're just becoming less and less relevant. But what do? Like, what do you take your kids out of school? You can't. You got to kind of keep them in there. And so the thing for me is about, it's tough to determine what subjects will be needed in the future, because the current subjects most probably won't. But the things that we could be preparing for, which I've started a masterclass on, I call it Future Superhumans, is understanding that how do you prepare somebody for uncertainty, adaptability, curiosity, excitement, and these very things that were totally disregarded in our old educational system. So the number one thing that I really want people to realize is that every single human being has a pocket of genius over their head. And this pocket of genius is incredibly unique to us. Whoever you are, you've got a very distinct fingerprint and curiosity. Your curiosity is your gateway to your genius. And schooling has always told us that curiosity should be left for the weekends and after school. You come sit in a classroom and do what everybody else is doing. But we realize in a multi-adaptive world, you can't use logic. In a multi-adaptive world, you can't use brawn. You have to use curiosity, because curiosity gives us this endless energy to continuously research and continuously dive deeper into what makes you most excited. In this multifaceted world, number one for me is figuring out why you're here. Mark Twain said it best. He said the two most important days of your life are when you're born and when you find out why. Find out why. That's the first thing. And the way you find out why is by exposing yourself to many different types of careers, many different types of entrepreneurs, many different types of jobs. Because if you think about it, when we grew up, the types of jobs we were exposed to might not have made us passionate, but they were the only ones around. For me, definitely, I was terrible at school. I'm not an academic. And so I didn't want to be an accountant. I didn't want to do any of those jobs. So I was kind of like unsuccessful or like a reprobate because I wasn't fitting in. Whereas in the world today, the kids that have got this passion for a specific topic or subject can utilize technology, the internet, create informal education for themselves, sell the products to people around the world, their services. It's just changed the way we need to be celebrating uniqueness and curiosity. So the very first thing is passion. Is how do you expose your kids to figuring out what they're passionate about, and then allow them to utilize that passion where time disappears. That's a great way to determine whether you've discovered why you're here on earth or not, is when time disappears. And when time disappears, you're now on track. That's the first thing. The second thing, one of the subjects we teach at the sort of superhuman masterclass is grit. Is how do you develop a level of grit? And I think the society we live in today is very much based on this Instagram 24-hour turnaround of things must happen quickly. But unfortunately, that's still not the case. And you really have to go deep into your subject. So imagine we had a subject where kids would have to create a workbook of different entrepreneurs and tracking their lives throughout their lives towards success, and realizing that they went bankrupt twice, they've lost their marriage. I mean, looking about Elon Musk, I mean, he's lost 5 marriages. So there's chaos and a deep level of grit that's required to create this Elon Musk that we all look at, who's got a complicated life beyond our imagination. And so the third aspect for me is storytelling. Is in a world of internet and the world that we have to convince people to join our mission, because remember, when you tap into your curiosity, you become mission-led. You stop thinking about things logically and in linear ways. You just want to dive deeper into your subject and become a specialist on it. In this space, you need to share your mission with the world to get other people to be excited about what you're doing. So passion, grit, and storytelling are the subjects that we need to be aiming at, whether you're in school or out of school, whether you're a kid or an adult. These are incredibly important in a multi-adaptive, uncertain world.
I love that. I just got chills actually hearing you speak about it, and I love the fact. I appreciate the fact that you're honest enough to say that the school system necessarily wasn't for you. That was something that you journeyed through, and perhaps only realized maybe later on in life, discovering those passions, going through the grit. That there's more to it than your education than what you had experienced initially. We use this term in our office called #ThinkersPlay. The hashtag is inevitable so that people can stay in tune with what we're doing with Thought Africa. But we're trying to expand upon the notion that thinkers play, making it one word, that working backwards, the play being that state of flow. You mentioned now where time disappears completely, is something that we're building into the DNA, or at least trying to have conversations with in different silos of people that we're coming across. The notion of thinking, that understanding, the curiosity, what is it that I want to do? How do I connect with not only what I'm doing, but the people, the mentors that I'm being exposed to in a conversation or in a classroom? How do I interpret that for myself? And then almost combine the two. With the hashtag is a little play on the technology as well. So we're moving into a world that if you search a certain hashtag, you can find anything, provided there's an association towards that hashtag. So that forms a lot of the foundation in which our conversations are had, but also in terms of the kind of work that we're trying to do. The framework in which we're also moving, so the thinkers play is there, but it's also understanding the notion of what is quality education. And more recently, we've linked up with an organization out of Palo Alto in California who try to amplify the work of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And we as a company have sort of honed in on the quality education UN SDG number 4. But even the two of us or three of us that are sitting in the office most of the time, we ask ourselves this question: what is that quality education? What does that look like to someone or a mom talking to their son or daughter at home, and trying to stimulate more of that conversation about what is it that you want to do or what is it that you're interested in? And I wonder if you have any frameworks or tools. You had some brilliant points now, but really trying to contextualize it for the parents that are dealing or had to have gone through 7 months of being the mom, the nanny, the cook, the cleaner, the person that is the teacher. Are there any other frameworks that they could use or try to adapt that is practical as of even this evening kind of mindset?
Look, I mean, I'm not a parent and I didn't go through that, but I have lots of friends that went through that. And I think they realized a couple things. One, how difficult a teacher's job is. Two, that their kids just sometimes aren't interested in the subject. So we don't have an attention deficit disorder. We have boredom with the subject at hand. And Matthew, I'm sure you and I could not sit through a class we didn't want to sit through for longer than 20 minutes. Just can't. And we're adults. Now you're talking about a little kid who's got so much energy and having to be forced to sit through something that they don't enjoy, having the exposure to the internet that we never had when we were in school. So yes, of course it's tough, man. These kids aren't enjoying it. The parents aren't enjoying it. The teachers aren't enjoying it because we're trying to force feed people old ways of thinking. I mean, the only framework I can think of is this idea that in agricultural times, we needed brawn, we needed muscles, we needed to understand the soil, the seasons, and understanding how all of it worked. Then we moved into the Industrial Revolution where intelligence became the most important thing, not brawn, because you needed to figure yourself out with your left brain and be logical in the way you thought, because it was a production line of linear innovation with brought about economies of scale, blah, blah, blah. But now we're moving into a world where intelligence is being replaced by machines. Linear thinking doesn't really solve any major issues because the future is uncertain. There's no patterns that repeat themselves. And so intuition becomes the most important thing. And it's this idea of intuition that plugs into your curiosity, that plugs you into your genius, that makes you totally unique, that takes you away from the surplus society, that makes you one person that can bring your impact to the world. The 14th century saw the Black Death happen and the end of the feudalism in Europe. And it also saw the birth of the Italian Renaissance. And this idea that we are in the death and destruction of an old world, we will see a new Renaissance that's coming post-COVID-19. And this new Renaissance will be the celebration of human curiosity and human uniqueness, because we love engaging with people that are unique in their approach, whether they're a chef or a fashion designer or a teacher or a speaker or an author. We want to be pleasantly surprised with unique stories, no matter what you're doing. You want to go to a restaurant where you've tasted food that you've never tasted before, you've never thought of flavors before. What brought that about? Their specific uniqueness. Now, if you went to a chef school and all of you learned the same thing and you keep going to the same restaurants with the same type of food, no curiosity and excitement has ever been there. No passion has been brought into it. So I think the future is all about our unique behavior. And as parents, the thing we need to be doing is invoking that uniqueness, invoking the fire of what makes that child passionate. And whether it's gardening or it's life-saving or it's fashion, it just doesn't matter. You have something called the internet. You have 5 billion people on it. All you have to do is get 0.00001% of them to pay you $1 a month, and you're living large. Instead of going, I need to study to get a job to work up myself to the corporate ladder, get rid of that thinking and say, okay, well, here I am with 5 billion people I've got access to on the internet. How do I start building a personal brand for my 10-year-old? How does this 10-year-old kid become passionate about what they want to sell on Instagram and YouTube? And if somebody's passionate about something, they can talk about it forever. And so you don't even have to think about things in a different way. You know, what must I say? What does the presentation look like? It's irrelevant when you're passionate about what you're talking about. So the future is about this renaissance. The future is about the celebration of our uniqueness. As parents, and what we should be doing is not pulling kids out of school because we don't know what else to do with them. We're in this transition phase. But in the time that you have with them, think about how you bring about their uniqueness and their curiosity and their excitement. And then how do you teach them technology that gives them the ability to sell on, start their mission, and create a tribe of their own online? I had some friends in Dubai. I mean, I'm still friends with them. They got 2 boys, 14 and 12. And they were complaining to me that they spend far too much time on Instagram and they're going to start blocking the Wi-Fi, like all parents do, right? And my response to them was, have you ever thought about teaching them how to sell on Instagram? Have you ever thought to them about the algorithms of how it works so you can use it as a marketplace? It's like, you know, my kid goes to the mall all the time. I need to pull him out the mall. Well, have you ever told them or taught him or her about retail? Maybe they love retail. Maybe they love fashion. Like, dive deep into what they like and make it a skill set that you can actually become proactive about. Now, the problem with parents is like our parents. Like our grandparents, you know, my grandparents were so unhappy that there was a TV in the lounge. She thought the end of the family was near. And then my parents were unhappy because there was a cell phone around. My mom actually hates earphones because it disengages you from the rest of the world. Because every generation wants to look at the past generation or the new generation and say, no, the technology is ruining them. I was in the perfect state of technology. These kids are overexposed. What do you think is going to happen in 10 years? There's going to be 20,000 times more technology. And so by you taking your kids off Instagram rather than skilling them up on it shows your lack of understanding of what's coming in the future. So parents have to re-educate themselves and then apply that to understanding what the future could look like and be an example of it for their kids.
So what you have mentioned now, although my question might be geared towards the parent at home, I find a lot of relevance or crossover into teachers in the classroom as well. And having those conversations in these project-based learning subjects, in our life skills lessons, in our life orientation lessons, and encouraging that conversation, as you rightfully said now, is a beautiful place to do so as well. I mean, these teachers or these institutions are no longer becoming a place of just learning, or rote learning at least, but curiosity. As you mentioned through your Singularity University as well as in Copenhagen. I want to take a slight segue for a moment. I know you were a little while ago, just before the lockdown happened, you were on another podcast called That's Interesting with a mutual friend of ours. And if I have it correct, I could be quoting you wrong. I apologize if I do. But you had mentioned there that the future had come 10 years early. So 2030 had just come a little bit sooner, and it completely flattened people, but and even more so flattened industries, logistics, health and fitness, cosmetics, etc., etc. And if I have it right, I mean, feel free to elaborate in a moment, but you had just briefly put out there saying that the fact that people were so surprised, the fact that people never thought they would be entrepreneurs, and now all of a sudden they find themselves without a job, or they found themselves having to rediscover their passion in middle age. Everyone seems so surprised by it, where if I have it right, your knowledge or your notion was that, guys, this was inevitable. It was going to happen. Do you have any thoughts on that? And if I have it right, I would love to hear your personal story as to when COVID hit. How did you deal with that stressful time and have to adapt?
Look, I mean, my publisher and I decided not to say 2030 arrived too early. We decided to change the idea to the future has arrived earlier than any of us expected it to. So, I mean, I used the term 2030 because it was kind of like an anchor point, I guess, that we were moving towards where we would have autonomous vehicles and nobody would be going to work. You'd be all like sitting at home and working. And so there were all these things that we were expecting to happen that just got fast tracked. But look, I also got taken by surprise because I was also preparing for it to come. I wasn't adverse to the fact that it was coming. I was just saying it was going to come in the future. I think a lot of people were just adverse that it was coming in the first place. And those are the people that really have taken the most strain, having to rethink or readopt or recalibrate the way they come into the world. And so for me, the idea here is that we've arrived in a world where we are moving away from the safety of corporations and education into a world that I'm calling the era of forced entrepreneurship. We're just being forced to become problem solvers. We are forced to unlearn old things to relearn new things. We are forced to realize that the safety net of your corporation, the government, your education, it isn't going to give you any, like, there's no, it's not holding you. There's no cocoon for you. And so for me, it's about how do you go about re-educating yourself on what actually makes you come alive. And so, yes, the 10 years has arrived too early. The future is here sooner than we thought about it. Some businesses can't make it through this process. Some marriages can't make it through this process. Some relationships can't make it through this process. A lot has come up. Black Lives Matter, Me Too, socioeconomic systems, $3 trillion being printed by the American government when South Africa can't get a loan at some ridiculous price because of the moolie. I mean, it's all a crock of rubbish. And we are questioning every single part of it. Is why women haven't been given a voice. Why has there been so much unconscious racism? Why has there been no questioning around the economic system that just doesn't make sense? It's like there's so much education. Look what we're talking about now. It's like it just doesn't make sense. Like, so we're in this upheaval of society. And this is an 80-year cycle that goes on every 80 years. The last time this happened was World War II, and we saw the death and destruction of an old way of thinking, and we saw the birth of the UN and the IMF and all these things happening in the early 50s. And here we are 80 years later, having gone through spring, summer, autumn, and now winter, the death and destruction of what's going on. So the future's arrived early, but also the old world is leaving us. And that's painful for people because the familiarity and the comfort zone that many of us had within that old world, we're just craving for. And we must remember that what we're craving for is just familiarity. Where we were was not great because none of us spent enough time with our families. None of us spent enough time in our communities. Most of us were running from pillar to post, never even seeing our kids, only seeing them once in a while. And we were just caught up. And so this new world we're in, the future that we're in, is giving us an opportunity to pause, let go of what didn't work, realize the future is here and we have no choice to make it go away. The old world is dying and destructing around us. And we must ask ourselves a very big question. Am I wanting to hold on to old stories of what was success and what it did look like and that normality? Or am I preparing myself for spring? Or am I preparing myself for the new renaissance that's coming? That requires a brand new me, a brand new way to approach it, and not something that can be logically thought about, but be brought about by this intuition and intrinsic curiosity that we have moving forward.
Sure. There is definitely an air, I think anyone who's been around, at least where we're based out in Cape Town, it's almost an uncertainty. I think that dealing with a fear or a mourning of the past that is being let go, and excitement of what is to come, but uncertain, not knowing how to go about it. Reading an article, and I'm quoting it again the other day, or I read an article the other day where the analogy was given that someone is in a paddle boat and they're trying to get to the shore, but they only have one oar. And in doing so, they're going in circles because there isn't anyone who's been pioneered by it. No one has done this before. And yet everyone's trying to reach out to each other and offer a hand up or lend a hand out. But still, it's stumbling forward in such a way that no one really knows how to go about it. Other than, I suppose, going right back to the essence of what we do as humans, and that's connect and be vulnerable and communicate and feed off those energies and uniqueness, as you rightfully mentioned slightly earlier.
Look, the transformation that we're in is like all other transformation. It has three sections. There's the sad, the strange, and the adventure. And the sad is when we have to say goodbye to what we knew. The strange is when nothing makes sense. It's no man's land. It's wilderness. It's lost. And then we'll pick up another adventure eventually. You know, the adventure will start again. But right now, we're in no man's land. Right now, nothing's familiar. It's all strange. And so there's this weird sort of irritation or fatigue in people's minds because we always, our brains, our neuroplasticity is continuously looking for something called DPO, which is duration, path, and outcome. And so every time we start a task, whether it's just going on holiday or going on a date or whatever it is, you're looking for the duration of that section, the path and what you're going to be doing on the path, and what should be the expected outcome from it. And right now, the whole world doesn't have DPO. Everybody, the whole side of your brain that's looking for DPO and an anchor into the future, it's just not there. And so this has brought about this level of fatigue and frustration and anger. And it's like a child being birthed out of a birth canal. It's very uncomfortable. Like you're in this place that's just, you're not in the womb, you're in the birth canal and you're about to pop into a new world, but you don't know what it looks like. You're stuck and uncomfortable. It's all strange. And so that's where we're at right now. And it's important for us to take note of where we are and also realize that it is coming. We just have to prepare for it and not be so worried that we're not in the room anymore.
100%. But it also unpacks or dives a little bit deeper into that notion of what does quality education look like again? Is education learned out of a textbook, and how is that actually preparing us for the future? Quite evidently so, it can't. And the way we've had to adapt and be agile in everything, not only from a business sense, but in our own emotions, in understanding how do I deal with a family dynamic where 2 of my family have lost a job and 1 of them's got COVID, and now I don't know how to deal with this. So it's inviting a lot more of this sort of vulnerability into homes, into communities, into schools, into organizations, which I guess is good. It's that rebirth, as you say. I wonder if there's an opportunity here. So I'm picking your brain. It's not necessarily a question per se, but with all the negative, I'm sort of coin it as that, the negative that has come out of the last 7 months, the situations, the COVID, just everything, I guess, uncertainty, and trying to be optimistic about what the future has to hold, and trying to prepare ourselves best through either upskilling ourselves or learning more about who I am as a person. I wonder if you have any thoughts on how we can look to sort of net out the negatives to the positives on what we've gone through and where we could go. Should we give attention to what we've just come out of, or what we're still currently in, and all its uncertainty, and then look to start again fresh in 2021? Or is it always going to be this like symbiosis of sort of back and forth? I don't know if that makes much sense, but I wonder if you can speak to what I was trying to explain.
There's a great saying that says that when nothing is certain, anything is possible.
Okay.
When nothing is certain, anything is possible. The opportunities are endless. When everything was certain, that's all you had as your opportunities. And so we have this opportunity to catalyze and move into a future that we wouldn't have had the opportunity to do before. Because that's what happens in death and destruction of an old world. New opportunities start. When a fire rages over Table Mountain, what happens? The minute that fire dies down, new seeds start popping up. And we don't know what those will be, but they've been dormant for a very long time, and they're going to start popping up. So I want to just very quickly just say 2021 is not a new start to this. We are very much, and I don't even know if we're in the middle, first third, last third quarter. I don't know where we are in this journey of COVID. Nobody knows. Yeah. And so 2021 is not a new start. Let me just bank that. It's the journey of the end and destruction of this world could be 2-3 years away. And so we have to get ourselves ready to be okay with this challenge. Not often, but what society has done, and especially in schooling, which I think is a huge issue, is we only ever gave like kudos and celebration to kids when they got a good mark on their report card, okay? What that does, it tells our brain that you can only celebrate and get a bit of dopamine when you've done well on your report card. Forget about the hours that you studied. Forget about all the research that you've done. That's not supposed to make you joyous. Only the result must make you joyous. And that's a big problem, because what happens is we don't give ourselves enough energy or enough permission to be joyous and have dopamine hitting our heads. So when your question comes to me like that, it's saying, look, I'm going to be unhappy until something clear happens. I'm going to be unhappy and only focus on the negative only when I start to see some light at the end of the tunnel. And so for me, if you look at the Navy SEALs guys and the guys that have actually made it through the Navy SEALs, they're the ones who have manipulated their brains to say, I don't need to finish this. I'm going to give my dopamine to myself for the struggle. The challenge itself is my celebration. So give me more challenge. Bring on the next thing that I need to do, because that's how I've designed my brain and how it thinks about challenges. So if you want to bring that back down to your question says, where's the end result of this? How do I let go of all this negativity so I can allow myself to have a dopamine hit eventually when this ends? And my answer to you is no. The challenge is the dopamine. The process that we're in, the uncertainty, is the thing that we should be relishing in, because it's giving us an opportunity to rethink, to unlearn, to get out of our own way, to bring new impact to the world. Now, what happens to most people when you're given so much uncertainty, you go into a place of victimhood. And victimhood has got three characters, like different types. You know, the victim is poor me, or I'm angry with somebody, or I feel sorry for somebody. These three characteristics they're all about drama. You know, when you watch the news and you stop watching the news, you only can feel three things: sorry for yourself, sorry for somebody else, or angry with somebody. It's called the drama triangle. And so when we reach this level of uncertainty, people don't want to become creators. They don't want to become new ways of thinking, because they want to get stuck in the old way, because it's a comfort zone. It's a habitual brain plasticity thing that wants to keep you held. And if anybody plugs it or prods it, you get angry or you get frustrated and you feel sorry for yourself. So we also have to realize that the world we're moving into is challenging. The world we're moving into is uncertain. The world we're moving into is not like it used to be. And if we lament on those things, that it's not like it used to be, oh, it's challenging, oh, it's uncertain, we never get the opportunity to move into creator and to start developing new things. So the question should be, how do I change my neuroplasticity to enjoy challenge, to enjoy uncertainty, and to enjoy the fact that when nothing is certain, anything is possible?
I love that. I love that. I'm going to take a slight segue. I know that in a few weeks' time, there is a new venture, which we have registered for. On the 19th of November, you're launching your new book, your fourth book, FutureNEXT. Without perhaps giving away too much for those that haven't looked, we'll put all the information out on our pages as well to register for John's virtual launch. But John, I'm going to bring it up as a quick overlay here. Would you be comfortable maybe expressing or speaking to what we can expect in FutureNEXT, and if it sinks into what we've been discussing much of this morning at all?
Yeah, great. Of course, it's very much in line with what we're discussing this morning, because I think the topic right now it's quite global, and it's trying to figure out FutureNEXT. That's why we wrote the book. Okay, so the book has got three sections to it. It has the first section that helps the readers figure out or try and apply 8 different emotional and mindset tools to bring about a level of calmness and elegance when trying to make a decision in uncertainty. So, for example, mourning your future memories, or your survivor consciousness trigger points. And what I've just said is being triggered into drama or triggered into creator. These are 8 different sets of tools that we share with the reader to say, look, we're moving into this stormy future. There's no clarity. Nobody knows what it's going to look like. Rather, get to ability to manage your behavior and understand your behavior better so that you can manage that when you can't manage the future. The second part of the book is all about reimagining the world that we're in. In other words, we must realize that the world we're in is really just a narrative and a story that's been handed down to us from generation to generation. And all stories move from whisper to wisdom, from fantasy to folklore, and they arrive at the most dangerous place a story can land. And that dangerous place a story can land is called, that's how we've always done it. Don't talk to me about something new. That's how we've always done it. Now, if you backtrack 150 years ago, slavery was just the way we've always done it. It was so normal that slaves thought it was normal. 120 years ago, no woman voted. That's just the way it was. And 40 years ago, we had child labor in camps around the world. That's just how it was. When we think back on these 3, and there's many, but let's just think back on these 3, how disgusting, ridiculous, and it's a joke actually to think that anything. So the second part of the book is, what narrative are we living right now that's a joke? What narrative are we living as an indoctrination that's come to us from education and society that we think is just the way it is, when actually it's not actually just the way it is, because I've just told you 3 things that you think are disgusting that are just 40 years old. So the thing and the doctrine of growth is what we are questioning here, is that how is it possible that we sacrifice our lives, our families' lives, the health of the earth, all based on the doctrine of growth, profitability over everything else? And we've all been caught up, including myself, in this idea that if I'm not growing, I'm lazy. If I'm not growing, I'm not successful. If I'm not doing everything I can to maximize my profitability, I'm just useless. And this is not symbiotic with nature. It's not mature. It's not elegant. It's not conscious. It's not aware at all. And so the question in the second part of the book is, can we reimagine a new world? What could it look like? What do we need to let go of in order to be able to reimagine a new world? And then the third part of the book is a guidebook. And it's a guidebook to say, look, here are 10 things that you could do as a consumer. Because as a consumer or an activist, where you spend your money and give your attention is actually what you're giving energy to. As an employee, you're an activist who you choose to work for, and where you choose to spend your time, you're activizing a certain scenario. So if you're working for a company that's destroying the planet, but you just need your salary, you're being an activist in supporting what that company's doing. I don't work with alcohol brands and I don't work with cigarette brands because I don't agree what ultimately happens with their marketing. Because they create the sensational amazingness of drinking some alcohol and being cool. But what about all the death and destruction and family abuse that comes from it? So I can't be involved with that. So as an activist speaker and strategist, I won't work with companies that have an ultimate result of ruining somebody's life. The next part's a guidebook of an employer as an entrepreneur and a policymaker. And so really the whole book is about how do you emotionally prepare? Can you reimagine the future? And how do you act as part of a new world rather than sitting back and going, government's useless, employees are useless, people around me are useless, I'm just going to give up and be part of the sheep that have no power in recreating and reimagining our world. So really the book is about just trying to help as many people go through the process that we're all going through. All of us are going through this. So how do we give a sort of ideation with neuroplasticity, emotional prowess, and deep economic principles? This is why I brought Iraj Abedian on. He's a professor of economics, because I'm not an economist, but I do know that I needed some economic brain power in this book because I wanted to be able to share a new economic, socio-economic system that we could set up in the world and what they could look like and what it needs to happen. And so Iraj was a fantastic co-author to be able to bring that sort of information to the book. That's brilliant. John, I'm really looking forward to the launch itself and to eventually dig my teeth into its pages. It's pretty exciting, and a lot of the notions, or at least the chapters, I can just better note down here of the 3 key components or the 3 key questions that you're asking and then answering through the book itself is something that I think it's quite funny. We're trying to answer within our organization and with our thinkers, i.e. our students or the people whom we're engaging with across whatever platform it might be. All the time is, and I keep bringing up with this education, it's the ability to just look inside and see what is it that I sort of want to do and how best can I prepare for my best future or the next day or whatever the case might be. We have these ideas and ideologies all the time that we're trying to flirt with, and I think this would be a perfect little framework for us to work from as well, and at least trying to get that up and going. So thank you for that. I wonder, just as a 1 or 2 points before we wrap up, is our fundamental goal as an organization is to try and connect passionate people. You will see in our banner at the top, we've got thinkers to thought leaders. Thinkers, anyone who's curious to learn a little bit more from somebody who has a little bit of that passion or expertise to share with the world. And would you be able to comment on the notion of people just learning from one another and that being okay, like that being a sufficient amount of education to just progress your life forward and feel okay in doing so? Do you think that is something that is valid? Do you think that's something that is has subsistence? Sorry. Yeah, that's, I suppose, as a final thought, your thinking on what thought leadership could do to a world, to those that are just learning to learn a little bit more from those people. Yeah, look, I think obviously there's many different ways to learn. Just depends on how your brain works. Some people learn through relationships. Some people learn through action. Some people learn through listening or writing. So it really just depends on the unique individual and how they want to learn. But the thing for me, and what really triggered me on your question there, is that thought leadership is just another way of saying I was so fascinated with the topic, I could not stop researching it. So what happened after weeks and months and years of me just being passionate about what I do, I become a thought leader. It's a result of you following this deep sort of unique factor in your curiosity. But the most amazing thing happens when you become this sort of thought leader is that you can share and collaborate quite openly, because you start to realize that nobody else is researching like you research. Nobody else is connecting those stories like you're connecting those stories. And so just sharing and collaboration become obvious over secretive competition. Secretive competition comes because it's become commoditized. So you don't want other people to have access to what you have because there's a finite number of or bit of information that I don't want to share. And then you look at people that have got access to their genius, they share openly, vastly, and generously. Because why? There's much more to come. And so we have to realize as thought leaders, it's important for us to think about, are we being generous with the information or are we being secretive about it? And if you're being secretive about it, you unknowingly telling the world that, or your genius, that I've just got enough information, that's this packet, I'm never going to get any more, so I can't share it. And so it becomes important for us to wake up to the fact that collaboration is much better than competition. Sharing is much better than secretive, because we're all in this together. I mean, why would you want to hold back the world from progressing? And I think Elon Musk is a great example, beside him being a tyrant with the people he works with, which what I've read about, is he's open with his genius. He shares it quite openly and frankly with the world and says, come, let's all go in this process. So can people learn from thought leaders? Absolutely. Is it the only way for them to learn? No. But if you are a thought leader and you want to become a thought leader, realize that collaboration and sharing is a sign that you have clicked into your genius and understand why you're here on earth.
Exactly right. Well, for those that do tune into this a little bit later on, if you catch this conversation, John Sanei, who is our current South African Elon Musk, who's based on home soil, in my opinion, in very many respects. John, in all seriousness, sharing that specialized knowledge, I know you're a very busy man, and you're very public about what you're sharing your knowledge on every platform that you exist on, and it's something that we're exceptionally grateful for. And your time this morning is something that we truly do appreciate. So thank you for doing that with our audience and with our community. We look forward to your virtual book launch in just a couple of weeks, and we'll be there to support you virtually for sure. And thank you very much again.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on. Ciao.
We'll chat to you soon. Bye.
Ciao.